Yeah, let's start.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I would like to call the meeting to order. May I invite you to take your seat, please? Take your seat, please. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to this first meeting of the ad hoc open-ended working group on benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources. Distinguished delegates, good morning. It is an honor and a privilege for me to address you this morning on the issue of digital sequences information on genetic resources, an extremely important and very topical issue indeed. The adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15 in Montreal last year is a significant milestone for the Convention and its protocols, and sets out an ambitious pathway to reach the global vision of a world living in harmony with nature by 2050. As you will recall, among the framework's key elements are 4 goals for 2050 and the 23 action-oriented targets for 2030. Goal C and the target 13 squarely put ABS as a central issue in this framework, and both include the digital sequences information and on genetic resources. After long and difficult negotiations, in Decision 15/9 on DSI, parties agreed that the benefits from the use DSI should be shared fairly and equitably. The distribution of this DSI and the distinctive practice in its use require a distinctive solution for benefit sharing. Decided to establish as part of a Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing for the use of DSI, including a global fund. Parties also decided to establish a fair, transparent, inclusive, participatory, and time-bound process to further development and operationalize the mechanism to be finalized at COP16. A list of issues for further consideration annexed to the decision and establishment of an ad hoc open-ended working group on DSI that would meet twice intersessionally with the mandate to extend the issue list in the annex to decision at its first meeting. As you know, our journey on DSI has been long and challenging, but we have always managed to forge ahead constructively in our negotiations. Now we have arrived here in Geneva to continue our journey that was set off in Montreal in December last year. Now we have in front of us an incredible opportunity to make history together developing how the multilateral mechanism and the fund will work in time for COP16. We look forward to your successful and productive deliberations to discuss what the multilateral DSI benefits sharing system would look like, and at the same time ensuring that it responds to the principles that you have agreed to in Montreal. At this juncture, allow me to pass to you my hopes for your work over the next few days. Let us move forward with ambitious spirit and the whole of government and the whole of society approach that give us the Kunming-Montreal biodiversity and honor what we have already agreed. Let our deliberations be positive, constructive, courageous, and ambitious. Let us be programmatic and provide the world a solution that is cost-effective, efficient, and simple. By the end of this meeting, it is my hope that we will all feel good about the substantial progress we have made and set off a clear process going forward. A solution to DSI is a critical part of the package and will be clear signal to the world that the Kunming-Montreal biodiversity framework and its associated decisions can be delivered on its objective to bring true transformative change and a world living in harmony with nature. Take courage, the world will change positively. If we do our utmost one by one, the world will change. With this word, I declare the meeting open. Thank you. Now I invite the Acting Executive Secretary of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Dr. David Cooper, to address this meeting. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates. Good morning and welcome to this first meeting of the ad hoc open-ended working group on benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources. I'd like to again thank the COP presidency and the Bureau for their leadership and guidance in the preparation of this meeting, and all parties and observers who have contributed to the process. I would also like to thank the many donors whose contributions have supported the participation of delegates from developing countries and countries with economies in transition. Distinguished delegates, as the chair, the representative of the COP presidents has already set out, this working group has a crucial and exciting task before it. COP15 parties adopted a landmark decision, Decision 15.9, which agreed that the benefits from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources should be shared fairly and equitably, and decided to establish a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing, including a global fund. And the multilateral mechanism and global fund were established as part of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our work here is to further develop and operationalize this multilateral mechanism and global fund. And the overall aims of this endeavor are reflected in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework itself. Among the goals of this ambitious framework is Goal C, that the monetary and non-monetary benefits from the utilization of genetic resources and digital sequence information on genetic resources are shared fairly and equitably, and substantially increased by 2050. And this goal is supported by Target 13, which calls for effective legal, policy, administrative, and capacity-building measures at all levels as appropriate, to ensure that benefits are shared fairly and equitably, facilitating a significant increase of the benefit shared by 2030. Your work here also relates to the other goals and targets of the framework, including those on capacity building and on the mobilization of financial resources. It is also relevant to discussions ongoing in other forums, including the World Health Organization, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, and the new agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. Many are watching what happens here. To further develop and operationalize the multilateral mechanism and global fund, we have to address, among other things, how the funds will be collected and how they will be dispersed, how non-monetary benefits will be facilitated, including through capacity building and development and technology transfer, how the mechanism and the fund itself will be governed, how the mechanism relates to national systems on access and benefit sharing developed under the Nagoya Protocol, and also to other processes. So we have important work to do, and we have a short time. We're due to complete the work by COP16. Expectations are high. Only 2 meetings of this working group are planned, and we must make good use of this first meeting. But I am confident that we can do so. When we last met here in Geneva in March 2021 for the meetings of the Working Group on the Post-2020 Framework and the subsidiary bodies, and in subsequent meetings in Nairobi and Montreal, you, as negotiators on DSI, were able to address difficult and complex issues, to bridge your differences, and to come together to set out the principles for an approach that will ensure fairness and equity with regards to the use of sequence data while supporting innovation and the considerable benefits that the use of DSI has the potential to provide to make our lives safer and healthier. Now is the time to come together once more and to translate the outline agreed at COP15 into concrete terms, to take the promise from COP15 and make it a tangible reality. The world is waiting to see how you will implement the COP agreement. Actions will need to be bold, transformative, and ambitious. Successful discussions here will provide us with a clear path to success at the second meeting of this working group and at COP16, to ensure that we have a practical system, one that shares the benefits fairly and equitably, contributes to supporting innovation, and supports the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. In short, a mechanism that contributes to all 3 objectives of the Convention and to the wider Sustainable Development Agenda. I wish you a highly productive meeting. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Mr. Cooper, for your introductory remarks. Allow me to express my sincere gratitude and extend my congratulations to you and the entire Secretariat team for your hard work in preparing for this meeting. Distinguished delegates, we will now have an opportunity for brief statement from regional group and a statement from major stakeholder groups. Before starting with the statement, I will ask the Secretariat to provide information on the use of the microphones and as well as other logistical arrangement. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, distinguished delegates. It is indeed a pleasure to see you all again. First of all, please note that this meeting is being held in person only. There is no online participation available. All plenary sessions will, however, be live streamed on the CBD's YouTube channel in all 6 official UN languages. Let me now begin with information on how to use the microphones. If you wish to request the floor, please press the microphone button only once, and the microphone light will turn green. We will be notified of your request. Please note that pressing the button twice will cancel the request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, the technician will turn on your microphone. There is nothing more for you to do. When your microphone light becomes red, please start speaking. When speaking, please remember to remove your earphones and keep them away from your microphones. Speak close to the microphone, slowly and clearly at dictation speed, so that interpreters can provide a clear translation for everyone in the room. It is important that all delegates fully understand your interventions. Delegates from intergovernmental organizations, indigenous peoples and local communities, NGOs and other groups such as women, youth or business who request the floor may be identified only by a number and not their organization name. When you thus are given the floor, please identify your organization before commencing your intervention. Delegates are kindly requested to keep within the assigned time when taking the floor and to speak at dictation speed to facilitate the work of the interpreters. Secondly, regarding statements, delegates are requested to upload their written statements using the online application on the meeting page. In case of any difficulty in using the online system, delegates may send the statement by email to statements@cbd.int. It greatly facilitates the work of the interpreters if you upload your statements prior to delivery. However, they will be posted on the website only after delivery. Statements must be submitted within 1 hour after the closure of the session in which the agenda item was considered. In your submission, please make sure to include the name of your country or organization and the agenda item on the first page of the document that is uploaded. Instructions were included in your priority pass email along with your dedicated link, which leads you directly to the upload page. Next, regarding side events. Side events will take place at 1:15 every afternoon, each day of the meeting, and 6:15 each evening. Please consult the online schedule on the meeting webpage, as well as the monitors for the event title, location, and time. We would now like to draw your attention to the mobile application, CBD Events app, which is free of charge for both Android and iPhone, and can be downloaded from the CBD website at www.cbd.int.cbdevents/. All information on sessions and side events will be available on the app, and it is updated regularly. We encourage you to use it. Finally, I would like to share important information about our meeting venue. The venue hours of operation are from 7 in the morning until midnight. For that, we request all the delegates to leave the premises in a timely manner after a late contact group, which will not end later than 11:30 p.m. By midnight, the building has to be empty. Catering facilities within the venue will be operational every morning from 9:30 a.m. until 8:30 p.m. Please note that food is not allowed in the meeting rooms. Drinks may be brought in using a container with a lid only. We look forward for your kind cooperation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm pleased now give the floor to representatives of the region and the major stakeholder groups for a brief high-level opening statement. Please note that there will be an opportunity later this morning to deliver a statement on the substance of the official documents. I would encourage regional representatives to present a consolidated statement covering high-level general messages on the issue at hand, and to also refer to any regional preparatory meetings. Statement should be limited to 5 minutes. I now give the floor for intervention. The first one is Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Switzerland is making this statement also on behalf of Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, Republic of Korea, United Kingdom, and the United States of America as members of the Just Cans Group. Just Cans would like to thank the CBD Secretariat for the organizing of this meeting here in Geneva and for preparing the pre-session documents. We all know, Mr. Chair, after the adoption of the historic Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework last year at COP15 in Montreal, there is still a lot of work in front of us to implement and cement what we all agreed. This includes the development of a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of DSI on genetic resources. COP Decision 15/9 provides a solid basis for further work towards the development of this multilateral mechanism. In particular, Decision 15/9 sets out various key elements of the mechanism. The criteria in paragraph 9 and 10 are of crucial importance and must be met in order to achieve fair and equitable benefit sharing for DSI. We need a practical solution which is simple, entails a low administrative burden, and is easy to implement. The solution must provide legal certainty for users and providers of DSI and support research and innovation, including by ensuring open access to DSI in public databases. The solution must also take into account the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, including with respect to the traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources that they hold. Moreover, the solution must be compatible with international legal obligations and be mutually supportive of other international access and benefit sharing instruments. And finally, it must be ensured that the benefits arising from the use of DSI support conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity and, inter alia, indigenous peoples and local communities. Mr. Chair, Decision 15/9 further states that tracking and tracing of DSI is not practical. Therefore, only a multilateral mechanism without any tracking and tracing requirements for DSI is likely to meet the criteria mentioned before. Hybrid approaches, which require tracking and tracing, in contrast, will result in a huge administrative burden and would likely be impractical and therefore are to be avoided. Moreover, capacity building and development, technology transfer in accordance with Article 16 of the Convention, and technical and scientific cooperation are key parts of a solution for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from the use of DSI, aiming at enabling everyone to benefit from the availability of DSI. Furthermore, the mechanism holds potential to contribute to the fulfillment of Target 19 on resource mobilization of the global framework. Mr. Chair, we appreciate the wealth of information provided in the synthesis of submitted views, as well as the summary of the compilation of lessons learned from other international funding mechanisms. However, we regret that Commission studies, which are expected to significantly contribute to the further development and the operationalization of the multilateral mechanism, will only become available for the second meeting of the working group in 2024. In this context, we would welcome additional new proposals to be included in the studies. In addition, we would like to highlight that indigenous peoples and specific stakeholder groups, such as industry and academia, play an important role in this process, as they are among the primary users and/or providers of DSI and might be directly affected by the new multilateral mechanism. It is therefore crucial that these stakeholder groups can participate in the discussions and can contribute to the development of the multilateral mechanism. Finally, Mr. Chair, the timeline of the process until COP16 is certainly highly ambitious given the numerous issues at hand. Therefore, possibilities for further online consultations between the first and the second meeting of the open-ended working group could be considered in order to advance the work in the most productive way and to reach the best possible outcome. Chair, we are committed to using the time here in Geneva to work with everyone in this room, including with all parties, governments, indigenous peoples and local communities, civil society, academia, women, youth, the private sector and others, in order to make progress and prepare the ground for a good outcome at the next COP. Just Cans looks forward to productive and successful discussions here in Geneva and throughout the process to COP16. I thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Next floor give to Cambodia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cambodia is pleased to take the floor on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region. At the outset, on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region, take this opportunity to sincerely thank the government of Switzerland for not only hosting the first meeting of the ad hoc open-end working group on benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, but also for providing warm hospitality for our delegates. The Asia-Pacific region would like to express appreciation and gratitude to the CBD Secretariat for their hard work in preparing excellent documents for the meeting. Mr. President, the Asia-Pacific region have an understanding of the challenges in front of us and the need to address them, in particular, benefit sharing from the use of the DSI from the genetic resources, despite the agreement to establish the multilateral agreement at COP15 by the decision 15/9. The Asia-Pacific region welcomed the proposed option contained in Section 3 of the document DSI/1/2. However, we share our view that the negotiation of this initial step should focus on some issue that parties could come to a conclusion and potentially make significant progress at this meeting. The Asia-Pacific region would like to present our position to the working group for consideration to initial discussion from the necessary issue group of A, contribution to the fund, D, governance, and E, related to other approach and system. Mr. President, the Asia-Pacific region mostly consists of developing countries, less developed countries, and small island developing states who are confronted with various challenges for effective implementation of Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, mainly due to inadequate financial and technical resources, as well as capacity building and development. Although we are aware that Target 19 of the framework aims to mobilize funds from all sources, but one of these could come from the use of the DSI. The Asia-Pacific region believes that the source of funding is very crucial to enable us to achieve our commitment to reach the goal and target set in Kunming-Montreal GBF, especially Target 13. In this perspective, the user and all relevant actors, including government, private sector, industry, and academia, who benefit from the use of the DSI, will play a significant role in contribution to the Global Fund. They should pursue concrete commitment for the contribution, and the meeting should explore an appropriate measure and procedure to regulate the benefit sharing in a fair, equitable, and transparency manner. Mr. President, Since the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of the DSI has been adopted as part of the Kunming GBF, it is important to associate Global Fund with the GBF Fund by ensuring transparency for its use. The Asia-Pacific region proposed the governance of the Global Fund to be in line with the GBF Fund with the clear visibility. The benefit from the use of the DSI could closely be related to the GBF Fund, and the Asia-Pacific region support the use of the GBF Fund structure adopted at the G7 Assembly in June 2023 as a mechanism for sharing benefit from the use of the DSI. In addition, the Asia-Pacific region is standing to discuss on the various views of monitoring, evaluation, and the effective implementation of the mechanism and the fund. We are very keen to contribute to the monitoring of fund that should be undertaken in coordination with the monitoring of the Kunming-Montreal GBS. The Asia-Pacific region takes note of the importance of capacity development for implementation and monitoring of the fund. We urge the working group to take consideration of the way and means to carrying out the long-term strategic plan for capacity building and development to ensure accountability and transparency of using of the Global Fund. Mr. President, at this junction, the Asia-Pacific region note the importance of establishment of the approach and system for better accessibility to the Global Fund, management, and sustainability. The Asia-Pacific region recognizes the relevant existing international funding mechanisms are important reference information and knowledge best for consideration in setting up of an applicable approach to the multilateral mechanism for the benefit sharing for the use of the DSI. Therefore, Asia-Pacific region urge parties and other relevant organizations to share information and lesson learned and initiate dialogue toward establishment of the new system. Mr. President, the Asia-Pacific region acknowledges the importance of the decision on benefit sharing mechanism from the use of the DSI and stand ready to participate in a constructive manner to maximize the distribution of benefit from the Global Fund in a balanced and fair approach among the parties, as well as to ensure the third objective of the convention is fulfilled. However, the Asia-Pacific region recommends that the mechanism should be provide legal certainty that are visible and predictable for both provider and user. Further, the Asia-Pacific region reiterates that any multilateral mechanism should benefit the country as well as IPLC that are custodian of the biological resources. Finally, Mr. President, the Asia-Pacific region reaffirms its commitment to continue working with the party and all other relevant stakeholders, including private sector, academia, and IPLC, to execute the COP decision, especially Decision 15/9, and to ensure that the implementation of multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of the DSI go in the right direction with the fair and transparency procedure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Cambodia speaker, on behalf of Asia and the Pacific region. Next speaker is Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is made on behalf of the Group of Latin America and the Caribbean countries. Finally, after the intense work that led to successful result for COP15, including the adoption of Decision 15/9, we gather here in Geneva to address one of the key issues for the intersessional period until COP16, the development and operationalization of a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, including a global fund. We take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity for their work. We would also like to thank the People's Republic of China presidency of COP15 and to the Swiss government for hosting us. At the outset of this meeting of the ad hoc open-ended working group on benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, we would like to share our views on some substantive matters. Firstly, GRULAC has come to Geneva with the expectation to consider Decision 15/9 as a starting point, taking full consideration of the agreements reached at the time of its adoption. The time has come to move forward and avoid revisiting matters that have already been agreed upon. Second, GRULAC wishes to reiterate the support of a hybrid system that fully respects the existing national access and benefit sharing measures and national legislations. Third, it should recognize and respect the rights of indigenous people and local communities as holders of traditional knowledge. Fourth, we also restate that open access does not mean free access. Fifth, we consider that a successful DSI fund does not diminish the international obligations of developed countries, as established in Article 20 of the Convention, and does not replace the need for new and additional means of implementation. Six, the mechanism should promote scientific research and innovation, as well as fulfill commitments on capacity building, technology transfer, and technical and scientific innovation. Finally, through this negotiation, we should keep at the forefront of our discussions that the main providers of DSI and traditional knowledge related to genetic resources are developing countries. Dear colleagues, GRULAC has consistently tried to build bridges, always showing willingness for dialogue in order to reach consensus. You can count on us to continue working in a constructive way to move forward and reach substantive results in the negotiations that will take place in future days. The Latin American and Caribbean Group wishes to reiterate our commitment to the fulfillment of the 3 goals of the Convention and to work hard in the upcoming process that we hope will have a successful conclusion at the next COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina, and also GRULAC region. Now, next speaker is European Union.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I take the floor on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The European Union and its member states express their satisfaction with the outcome of COP15 and the decision to establish a multilateral mechanism to share benefits from digital sequence information, DSI, and it is ready to continue engaging in the discussions to make the multilateral mechanism operational. The European Union and its member states take note of the compilation of views submitted by the parties, non-party states, and other stakeholders, and the summary of lessons learned from other multilateral mechanisms. And we also thank the CBD Secretariat for the work done to prepare these documents. We are also looking forward to the outcomes of the 2 studies requested under paragraphs 22B and C of Decision 15/9 to further support the challenging task of this working group on DSI. The European Union would like to reiterate that any consideration, evaluation, and identification of the most suitable modalities to operationalize the mechanism must be done in line with the principles laid down under paragraphs 9 and 10 of the decision in order to fulfill those principles. Those modalities should be simple. They should not affect open access to data, nor should they hamper research. They should ensure legal clarity and certainty, generate more benefits, including both monetary and non-monetary benefits, as well as costs, and contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. To achieve these goals, we believe that the identification of a clear trigger point for benefit sharing will be crucial in future discussions, as will be the need to avoid any overlapping between the multilateral mechanism and other benefit sharing obligations deriving from domestic ABS legislations applicable to DSI, including those implementing the Nagoya Protocol. The European Union and its member states recall that Decision 15/9 establishes a benefit-sharing mechanism that is clearly based on a multilateral approach. We would like to highlight that the obligations under such a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing, that is, benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, apply to all users of DSI, regardless of where they are located, which is important to ensure a level playing field. The EU and its member states strongly support the possibility to receive direct contributions from the private sector to the fund. And we believe that this is an issue that must be taken into account when discussing the overall governance of the mechanism and the fund. In conclusion, bearing in mind the time-bound process established by COP Decision 15/9, the EU and its member states call on the working group to identify outstanding issues that require additional discussion, and the discussion of which should be prioritized in order to make good progress with the work we all have ahead of us. We remain flexible to considering possible additional consultations as needed before the second meeting of the OEWG, as suggested in Section 3 of the document CBD, WGDSI-1/2. Final considerations about possible additional consultations will depend upon the outcomes of this first meeting of the working group and should take into account that several informal meetings promoted by parties and other non-governmental actors have already been planned before the second meeting of the working group and COP16. Indigenous peoples and local communities are essential in the deliberation of DSI and need to be taken into account. We look forward to engaging in constructive discussion in the following days. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, EU and its member states. Next speaker is Namibia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Namibia is reading this statement on behalf of Africa. Firstly, we would like to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting these meetings and the Secretariat for preparing the documents on DSI before us, including the synthesis of views and lessons learned from other multilateral mechanisms. It provides a good basis for our discussions today, including informing further work and intersessional processes leading up to COP16. Mr. President, Africa also appreciates the progress made in COP15, where the global community demonstrated a renewed commitment towards implementing the third objective of the Convention and agreed that the benefits of the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources should be shared fairly and equitably. Africa also appreciates the commitment to establish a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information, including a global fund in a timely manner. Mr. President, we further reiterate Africa's commitment towards further development of the multilateral mechanism for adoption at COP16 and further stress the urgency to advance the work and find a common understanding to fulfill our mandate in a timely manner. We believe that we have the basic building blocks to move this discussion towards the development and operationalization of the mechanism, and that we have a good opportunity to fast-track the work here in Geneva. In that regard, we urge parties to work in that spirit during this working group meeting. Regarding the discussion approach to the work ahead of us, Africa welcomes the grouping of the clusters as a starting point for discussions, but believe that at some point we need to be able to see the form and structure of the mechanism in its totality. We recognize that there are aspects in the clusters that we can find common understanding at this meeting, which should be moved forward to advance our mandate. We also recognize that there are other issues in the clusters where a lot of divergences exist and would benefit from outstanding studies. However, Africa still believes that we have enough information to advance work at this meeting, and any further delay will not be accepted. As Africa, we reiterate our position to ensure that contributions to the Global Fund should come from at least 1% of all biodiversity commercial sales, in addition to contributions from other sources, to reach a collective ambition of closing the financing gap for biodiversity under Target 19. Specifically, our target should focus on accruing financial resources to close the $200 billion financial gap. To achieve the potential of collecting billions of biodiversity through this mechanism, we believe that any contribution to the fund, especially from industry, should be mandatory in addition to any voluntary contribution where we expect developed countries to demonstrate leadership. Africa further believes that the disbursement of funds should support biodiversity conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, prioritizing developing countries, indigenous peoples and local communities based on their needs and through country-specific allocations. Regarding capacity building and development, Africa believes that capacity building and development should aim to support developing countries in generating, accessing, and use DSI for research and innovation, and also to allow developing parties to participate effectively in the mechanism. We strongly believe there is a need to have specific, clearly defined and targeted capacity building and development for DSI through a DSI capacity development program, which can be linked to elements adopted in Decision 15/8 of the Convention. We also have much to learn from the Nagoya Protocol regarding capacity building and development and non-monetary benefit sharing in general. On governance, Africa stands by its initial position that the COP shall provide overall authority for the fund and that the fund should operate under a financial mechanism of the Convention of Biological Diversity. In regard to the relationship between the multilateral and bilateral mechanism, Africa believes that the multilateral mechanism should address DSI and the bilateral mechanism should address tangible genetic resources. Finally, Mr. President, Africa came prepared to advance work on further development of this mechanism for its timely operationalization, which we believe to be critically important for the success of COP16. Therefore, any delays may not be accepted by our region. It is important for Africa that we collaboratively deliver a successful mechanism to support resource mobilization, conservation, and sustainable use of biodiversity, and support the vision of living in harmony with nature. We further stress that time is not on our side. I thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to present. The statement will be sent to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Namibia and the African group. I see there is no more requests from the written, then I give the floor to stakeholder groups. First is IPLC.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Katie Lee, and I speak on behalf of the Indigenous International Forum on Biodiversity. The foundation for a long-term solution on DSI is to create conditions for a robust, transparent, and flexible approach that recognizes the diversity of the interests of parties, Indigenous peoples, and local communities. It needs to recognize the unique relationship that Indigenous peoples and local communities have with biodiversity and their conservation and diversification of genetic diversity in the past, present, and future. This can be created by two practical steps. Firstly, by establishing a foundational requirement that DSI must be deposited within databases and repositories that participate in the mechanism. This will create basic conditions of trust, provide legal certainty, and generate substantive benefits. Secondly, the identification of a set of basic terms and conditions that give participants choices when sharing DSI. This should not assume that DSI will go into the public domain. Basic terms and conditions of use must be combined with measures to promote ethical, open, and responsible data governance. Any DSI obtained through free prior informed consent must be deposited into databases linked to the mechanism. In line with the UNESCO recommendation on open science and the OECD recommendation on enhancing access to and sharing of data, a core principle is that data sharing arrangements should be as open as possible to maximize benefits to society and as close as necessary to protect legitimate public and private interests, including respect and safeguards for the rights of IPs, LCs, women, and youth. The FAIR principles are widely recognized as good practice in open research and innovation, and the complementary care principles consider the needs and values of IPs and LCs. Many parties, such as the EU, the UK, Australia, and Canada, already support open and responsible data governance in their funding policies, and we are happy to discuss further examples of this. Additional measures of particular importance include providing measures to associate provenance metadata for species that are socioeconomically and culturally significant as defined by IPs and LCs, such as traditional knowledge and biocultural notices and labels. Regarding the governance of the fund, the participation of IPs, LCs, and stakeholders should be integral to the design, management, priority setting, and governance of the fund. Trigger points for contributions to the fund should stem from multiple revenue generation measures. This should be seen as part of the resource mobilization strategy to support implementation of the GBF, such as Target 21. Disbursement of funds needs to be fair, equitable, transparent, practical, secure, and directly accessible for IPs and LCs across all 7 socio-cultural regions, ensuring their full and effective participation. We have an expanded version of our statement, which we are happy to circulate. Thank you, co-chairs. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, IPLC. Then the next floor will give to NGO seat number 26. Please identify your organization first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Third World Network, Ecoropa, and Sea-Rise, active members of the CBD Alliance who are present at this meeting. We thank the parties for having taken up Decision 15.9, which agrees to share, fairly and equitably, the benefits arising from the use of DSI. This decision took a lot of effort to arrive at. The moment has now come to show the world that all these efforts are not meaningless. We have gathered here to develop an efficient, accountable, and transparent multilateral mechanism which binds users of DSI to share benefits fairly and equitably. Chair, the standard that the CBD and the Nagoya Protocol maintains is appropriate access to genetic resources. However, when it comes to DSI, the idea of open access has dominated the discussions without a real examination of what that standard refers to. Since expert after expert have agreed that DSI practically reduces the relevance of physical access to genetic resources, we need to be careful about the implications of open access. It should not become free access, where users undertake no commitments to share benefits with the providers of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, particularly indigenous peoples and local communities. Open access should also meet the standard of appropriateness. This will only happen if the medium used to share DSI becomes accountable to CBD parties and maintains minimum access rules. In this regard, we believe that accountability of databases should be central to the discussions here. Failing to infuse accountability into the current practices of DSI sharing will only incentivize the privatization of wealth generated using biodiversity and associated traditional knowledge, while costs are borne by the public. Further, just as countries are cautious about the cross-border flow of financial and economic data, there needs to be equally caution about the cross-border flow of genetic data or DSI, given their commercial and economic applications. Therefore, the multilateral mechanism has to respect the sovereignty of states as well as the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Parties should retain control over data generation, storage, and dissemination. Only then can they exercise their sovereignty in the true sense. Basic international law principles extend the sovereignty of states to digital infrastructure and assets, including data, and this should not be abridged by the multilateral mechanism. Finally, with regard to the Global Fund that is to be part of the multilateral mechanism, we do not believe that distribution based on competitive project financing alone is the answer. While a part of the fund could be distributed this way, the idea that one has to compete for the benefits which they are actually entitled to is unjust. This cannot be the basis of real benefit sharing. We need to explore other ways by which funds should be transferred to the providers of the genetic sequences, particularly the indigenous peoples and local communities who have stewarded biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Next is a woman.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ruth Spencer from Antigua and Barbuda, speaking on behalf of the CBD Women's Caucus. We have walked the walk that led to having the Nagoya Protocol today, as the African group just stated. The CBD Women's Caucus is responding to the call in paragraph 14 of the decision 15/9. We are here as actors and partners and ready to fully and effectively participate. Our priorities must be conceptualized and taken into account. We urge parties and other stakeholders, including other governments, business, and academia, to act accordingly with what they have agreed and said here and in so many other forums. Therefore, the CBD Women's Caucus expects the inclusion of gender responsiveness and gender approaches in the next assessments of DSI issues, including the multilateral mechanism for ABS from DSI and in capacity building considerations. We also call for gender responsiveness in all the work and framework and mechanisms related to DSI in line with the Kumin Global Biodiversity Framework by all actors involved in DSI. We also call for verifiable, fair, transparent, collaborative, and accountable processes that responds to the needs of women. We look forward to further discussions on open access and benefit sharing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next one is business and industry.
Hello, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the International Chamber of Commerce, which brings together businesses of all sizes from different sectors around the world. Biodiversity-based research is a fast-moving global field which involves collaboration between actors from the public and private sectors in different countries. The multilateral benefit sharing mechanism has the potential to support or to hinder its development across the world, as well as the knowledge sharing and partnerships that help develop capacity. We therefore urge all parties in this process to keep in focus the broader picture and the societal and environmental benefits and economic opportunities that research and innovation can generate for all countries. In short, let us not inadvertently stifle the goose that's laying the golden eggs. For the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism to function effectively for all involved, it needs to be simple, workable, and affordable, provide legal certainty, and be aligned with scientific and business realities. A harmonious implementation with other existing specialized benefit sharing mechanisms will also be crucial to avoid duplication and complexity. The mechanism should avoid any approaches or modalities which would require tracking and tracing of specific DSI in processes or products throughout the value chain. This would effectively require tracing of all DSI, which would not be feasible and be impossible to monitor. To avoid tracking and tracing, and also the uncertainty, delay, and administrative costs that can result from bilateral obligations, we believe that the mechanism should be exclusively multilateral and universally applied by all parties. Pursuing a hybrid approach could in fact be detrimental to individual countries, as users will be less likely to use DSI from countries where there is complexity. Countries are understandably concerned about how the funds from the multilateral mechanism will be distributed. To address this key issue, the disbursement system could ensure that all countries which have delegated national ABS management for DSI to the mechanism are able to benefit from the fund for conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, including capacity building. To open a path towards simplifying current ABS systems, the multilateral mechanism should include a possibility for countries to also integrate their genetic resources. This would provide an additional option for countries to leverage the value of the biodiversity to support socioeconomic development. And a system that includes physical genetic resources and DSI would also be flexible enough to integrate emerging technologies, making it more future-proof. The details of how the mechanism will function will be critical to properly evaluate its workability and impact on countries and stakeholders. ICC has outlined some considerations for these in a submission which has been posted in the ABS Clearinghouse, and we are committed to working with all parties, right holders, and stakeholders in these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. The last request on the list is academic and research. You have the floor.
Hello, my name is Dr. Guilherme Oliveira from the Vale Institute of Technology in Brazil. I speak on behalf of the DSI Scientific Network, representing 81 members from 27 countries that use DSI in their regular lives in academia. We congratulate parties on the COP15 decision to establish a multilateral mechanism to share benefits from DSI, a compromise solution we'll wholeheartedly support. Looking at the issues for further discussion, we have a top 5 list of opportunities for progress in this intersessional period. 1. Geographical origin or country tags. We support the need to return benefits back to the countries of origin of providers, full stop. but investigating how this can be done efficiently and non-bureaucratically must be a priority. We recently released a policy brief on this issue available on our website and look forward to discussing individually with parties. 2, harmonization. Users need one set of rules for how to share DSI benefits across UN fora. We use data from all fora all the time. An overarching, coherent system for DSI benefit sharing is essential for this new system to work. A filter must be applied in deciding whether a CBD-DSI system would work. Is it compatible with DSI rules in other UN fora? 3, trigger points. While many parties support monetary benefit sharing at the point of commercialization, we suspect the devil will be in the details. We do not support an individual product-based approach to monetary benefit sharing, as this will require tracking and tracing. 4, role of academia. We very much appreciated the opportunity for DSI academic users to participate in the intersessional 2022 DSI Informal Advisory Group. We would strongly support the reincarnation of this group to support technical exchange. 5, capacity development and technology transfer. Everyone agrees more DSI capacity building is needed, but now it is time to fill these details. The DSI playing field is unequal. We have technical, scientific, and practical ideas for DSI capacity building, as well as non-monetary benefit sharing. We would like to partner with other champions to fill in this topic with content, vision, and urgency. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see no more requests from the floor. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we have concluded agenda item 1, and we will now take up agenda item 2 on organizational matters. We will begin with the item with the election of the reporter on the basis of the recommendation from the Bureau. After consultation, the Bureau proposed one of its members, Ms. Angela Laurent from Moldova, to serve as a reporter for the present meeting. Is there any objection to the proposed reporter for this meeting? I see no objections. I congratulate Ms. Laurent on her election as a reporter and invite her to come and take her seat at the podium. This brings us to the adoption. Thank you. This brings us to the adoption of the agenda and the organization of work. The Acting Executive Secretary, in consultation with the Bureau and in accordance with the Rule 8 and 9 of the Rule of the Procedure, prepared a provisional agenda for this first meeting of the working group. The provisional agenda of this working group is contained in document WGDSI-1/1, and a notation to the provisional agenda are contained in document WGDSI-1/1/ADD.1. I first submit the provisional agenda for adoption. I propose that the provisional agenda be adopted as the agenda for this meeting. So I see the request from the Democratic Republic of Congo. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. Forgive me to come back, but we just noted that the statements from observers were not supported by the state parties. I just wanted to note that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for your recommendation. After I consult with the Secretariat, it's a common practice. The presentation from the observers, they have just comments, no substantive change to the process and also the text. So in this case, there is no need to have the support from the parties. So that's an explanation. I hope it's satisfied with you. Okay, we took note what your concerns. So thank you. So if there is no objection to the document, so the agenda is adopted. Regarding the organization of work, the acting executive secretary, in consultation with the Bureau, proposed the allocation of tasks for the meeting as described in Annex 1 of the annotated agenda contained in document WGDSI-1/1/ADD.1. During this meeting, we have only one substantive agenda item. The working group is expected to conduct its work in plenary session with the support of a committee of the whole and contact groups as needed. Especially, I propose that we establish a committee of the whole to consider agenda item 3. Our main substantive agenda item, interpretation in the 6 official languages of the United Nations will be provided in plenary sessions and the sessions of the Committee of the Whole. With this explanation, I submit the organization of work for approval. I see no objections, so the organization of work is approved. After consultation with the Bureau, I propose that Mr. Mufaso, member of Malawi, and Mr. William Lockhart of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland be elected as co-chairs for the Committee of the Whole. The co-chairs would continue their responsibility at the second meeting of the working group and also get any intersessional work that may be required. We will record that Mr. Campbell and Mr. Lockhart facilitate negotiations in the friends of the co-chairs to the contact group on DSI since the 3rd meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as during COP15 in Montreal in December last year. I trust that this proposal is agreeable to you. I see no objection. I would like to congratulate Mr. Calabra and Mr. Lockhart for their election as co-chairs for the Committee of the Whole. Thank you all. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, this brings us to the end of agenda item 2 and the plenary session for this morning. I will now adjourn the plenary and invite Mr. Campbell and Mr. Lockhart to come to the podium to start their work as co-chairs for the Committee of the Whole. At this juncture, let me reiterate my hope that a spirit of compromise and goodwill will prevail throughout our discussions and that you will find common understanding even on issues that might currently show differences. I'm sure that with the collective wisdom and experience in this room, this working group will be able to make good progress. We will take a short break to rearrange the podium. I would kindly ask you to remain seated. We will resume very shortly. The plenary session is adjourned.
Microphone button, I'm going to put that there. All right, so I'm going to gavel more. Is that any better?
Yeah, okay, just start.
Apparently, dear delegates, good morning. How are you all? I'm getting advice from the presidency to gavel even harder. I'm going to gavel with some weight now. There we are, very good. Thank you all. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Let's begin the first meeting of the Committee of the Whole, of the first meeting of the Open-Ended Working Group on DSI. It's a pleasure to be here. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, thank you for the trust which you have placed in my co-chair and I to deliver this important mandate, which many of us worked so hard to agree at COP15. It's a truly serious responsibility, but it will be an honor to serve you by facilitating your deliberations and helping you make quick progress. We all know we are losing nature globally faster than ever before. This has profound consequences for us, our countries, our economies, our families. We need to seek bold, new, innovative solutions to the loss of nature. Ways of ensuring that markets, for the first time, treat nature as a properly finite resource. The coming together of this open-ended working group presents us with real opportunities. Opportunities to use the mechanism and the fund which we agreed at COP15 to generate new resources and to use those resources to deliver so many of the other commitments we have already made. We must move with determination and energy to seize those opportunities. But of course, we are not here to make an example of those businesses which use DSI or ask them to do more than their fair share. In the same way we cannot exist without nature, we also cannot exist without the dedication of those who work hard to make our medicines or the food we eat. We have been clear throughout our work that if you are a user of DSI, we will not put in place measures which are incompatible with the principles of open access to data. We are here to cooperate. Parties, observers, users, and representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities to show the rest of the world that nature can be valued, that it can be protected, and that it can be restored by working across boundaries in new forms of collaboration.
Thank you. Most of us met several times last year, and we held difficult and contentious negotiations long into the night. But we worked together in the spirit of compromise to overcome our differences and to embrace progress. The President has been clear that he expects all of us over the coming meeting of the working group to continue in the spirit of collaboration, endeavor, innovation, and courage. We have very little time. We must not waste it by reopening all discussions or imagining that we can change some aspects of the COP's decisions that were already agreed. I do not think that it will be easy, but as co-chairs, we are counting on our collective dedication and hard work in order to make progress. We must all therefore collectively remain resolutely focused on the fact that the world needs us now more than ever to make progress. Distinguished delegates, the Committee of the Whole has been mandated to address Agenda Item 3 on issues for further consideration as set out in the annex to Decision 15/9. This agenda item contributes to the overall mandate of the working group from Decision 15/9 to undertake further development and operationalization of the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources. At this first meeting, we'll be working on the basis of the views submitted on the issues set out in the annex to the decision 15/9 and the lessons learned from other international funding mechanisms. Before we go any further, allow me to outline how we'll proceed our work in the Committee of the Whole. We will start with a brief presentation from the Secretariat on other relevant international processes. We are aware that the topic of DSI is being discussed in other fora, so we thought it might be useful to have an overview of these other processes. This will be followed by a brief update by the Secretariat on the status of work on resource mobilization. Thereafter, we will hear an introduction of the documents prepared for this agenda item, after which we'll begin our discussion and start hearing your views on the issues before us. With that, I invite the Secretariat to present an overview of other relevant international processes. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and good morning, everyone. So yes, allow me to provide a brief overview of work underway in other intergovernmental fora where negotiations related to benefit sharing from the use of DSI are taking place. So there are three main fora where this is happening. It's under the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, under the World Health Organization, and as part of the agreements under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, known as the BBNJ Agreement. Thanks. So on this slide, we've endeavored to show the timing of some of the key milestones that are expected under these different fora. So the first row is the work under the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. The 10th session of the governing body of the International Treaty will be held next week in Rome. And at that meeting, it will consider a checkpoint report of the co-chairs of the ad hoc open-ended working group to enhance the functioning of the multilateral system, which is the process or the group that is working and has a mandate or part of its work includes consideration of issues related to DSI. Following the 10th session of the governing body, the ad hoc open-ended working group on the multilateral system will be continuing to meet and advance negotiations in 2024 and 2025, and it will be submitting its outcomes to the 11th session of the governing body of the treaty, which is scheduled for November 2025. A representative of the treaty secretariat couldn't be here today, but they have shared a statement that will be posted online among the statements for this meeting, and they'll be here tomorrow to answer any questions or provide any further information as needed. The second forum where negotiations are taking place is the World Health Organization. There are two distinct processes that are underway at WHO. The first is the intergovernmental negotiating body to draft and negotiate a WHO convention, agreement, or other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The INB, that's the first of the two WHO processes in the slide there. The draft text of the WHO pandemic agreement, so-called quote-unquote pandemic agreement, was released on the 30th of October 2023. The next meeting of the intergovernmental negotiating body is scheduled for the beginning of December of this year, 4th to 6th December. and the outcomes of the INB process are to be submitted to the 77th World Health Assembly in May 2024, with the expectation that the work on the development and negotiation of the pandemic agreement will be completed at the World Health Assembly. The second process underway at WHO is the Working Group on Amendments to the International Health Regulations 2005. This is the IHR process that's referred to on the slide. The International Health Regulations are an overarching legal framework that define countries' rights and obligations in handling public health events and emergencies that have the potential to cross borders. And as the name of the working group suggests, it is considering amendments to the 2005 version of the International Health Regulations. A compilation of proposed amendments to the International Health Regulations was published in the fall of 2022. And further discussions and consultations on these proposals, they have been ongoing since 2022, but they will be continuing in the new year between January and May of 2024. At the moment, no further meetings of the working group have been announced. However, additional meetings of the working group are expected. And similar to the intergovernmental negotiating body, the outcomes of the working group on amendments to the International Health Regulations are to be submitted to the 77th World Health Assembly in May 2024, also with the expectation that that process will conclude at that point in time. Finally, and that's the fourth row in the slide, is the BBNJ agreement. So the agreement itself was adopted earlier this year, and the agreement includes provisions on benefit sharing from the use of DSI. These provisions will require further development after the entry into force of the agreement. The agreement is currently open for signatures and will remain open for signatures until the 20th of September 2025. Furthermore, 60 ratifications are required for entry into force of the agreement, and that's what we've endeavored to indicate on the slide there with the arrow, that the ratification process will be ongoing over the next few years. There is the possibility of a preparatory committee prior to entry into force to undertake preparatory work. However, nothing has been agreed or decided to on this point up till now. And then just to mention that the final row in the slide there is, of course, the milestones of the work on digital sequence information under the convention, showing this meeting of the DSI working group, the meeting that's planned for August of next year, followed by COP16 in October, November of 2024. Thank you very much, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. It was useful to remind us of the other processes that are also addressing DSI. Thank you. Would also like to recall the decision 15/9 on DSI was part of a package of decisions related to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. In particular, decisions 15/9 and decision 15/7 on resource mobilization include cross-references to each other with regard to the Global Fund of the Multilateral Mechanism on DSI. Therefore, I would like to invite the Secretariat to provide brief information on the work of the Advisory Group on Resource Mobilization. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair, distinguished delegates. The Advisory Committee on Resource Mobilization was established by the Conference of Parties at its 15th meeting and that was in decision 15/7, paragraph 43. The advisory committee was assigned 3 main tasks with a view to providing recommendations thereon to the subsidiary body on implementation and to the conference of the parties at its 16th meeting. These tasks may be summarized as follows. The first one, to explore the current biodiversity finance landscape with a view to identify gaps and opportunities to address those gaps. 2, to fully align the strategy for resource mobilization with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. 3, to explore options for a global instrument on biodiversity finance. This last point includes consideration of the entity to host the Global Fund of the Multilateral Mechanism on DSI. The Advisory Committee had its first meeting in Kinshasa from 25th to 29th September 2023 and considered these items with emphasis on the exploration of the current biodiversity finance landscape and initial discussions on how to address the other 2 items. The committee also heard a briefing from the Secretariat providing an overview on the preparations for the first meeting of the ad hoc open-ended working group on DSI. The meeting produced a timeline for their process going forward, and this is available in the co-chair's summary of the meeting. The link to the outcome of the meeting is displayed on the screen. Thank you, co-chair.
Thank you once again, Secretariat, for the information on the work of the advisory group on resource mobilization. Distinguished delegates, we are now ready to commence with our substantive work on agenda item 3. We will now request the Secretariat to introduce the documents prepared for this meeting. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Co-Chairperson. Distinguished delegates, you will recall that in decision 15/9, the Conference of the Parties invited parties, other governments, indigenous people, and local communities and relevant organizations to submit views on the issues set out in the annex to the decision and requested the Executive Secretary to compile and synthesize those views and to make them available to the working group. The Conference of the Parties also requested the Executive Secretary to compile lessons learned from other funds, carry out a modeling study on the multilateral mechanism, as well as the trigger points for benefit sharing along the value chain. For this agenda item, the Secretariat has prepared documents on the basis of the work requested by the Conference of the Parties to the Executive Secretary in decision 15/9. Document CBD-1/2/add1 contains a synthesis of the views submitted on the issues set out in the annex to decision 15/9 and requested in paragraph 20. Document CBD-1/2/add2 is the executive summary of the compilation of lessons learned from other international funding mechanisms as requested in paragraph 22A of the decision. And document CBD-WGDSI-1/INF/1 is the full compilation of those lessons learned. Document CBD-WGDSI-1/2/add3 presents the progress to date on the studies from paragraphs 22B and 22C of decision 15/9. On the basis of documents add1 and add2, the Secretariat prepared document CBD-WGDSI-1/2 as a synthesis of the key points for consideration by the working group. The section 1 of this document reminds us of the background on DSI to date. Section 2 contains the key points for each of the grouping of issues, and section 3 provides the proposal of a way forward for the work of this group at the present meeting. In order to make it easier to present the 16 issues for further consideration from the annex to Decision 15/9, the information was organized in 5 groupings, which can be found in the table in section 2, as well as in the graph in the annex to document CBD/WGDSI-1/2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat, for all the background documents that will form the basis for our discussion moving further. I now hand over to my co-chair to take us into the next segment of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, co-chair. Right, it's the bit you've been waiting for. We'll shortly open the floor for interventions. Before I do that, I'll just provide a short section of guidance to structure our conversation. We will focus our deliberations today on the documents as prepared by the Executive Secretary, and we will especially work on document CBD/WGDSI/1/2. We welcome your overall reflections on the elements in sections 2 and 3. We will also encourage and welcome reflections from Indigenous peoples and local communities and stakeholders, as this will give us a complete first reading on which this working group will base its work over the course of this week. Because we imagine a number of you will want to take the floor, we encourage you to keep your statements concise so that everyone who wants to will have a chance to speak, and please focus on the essential points. We will have a time limit for interventions, 6 minutes for parties who are speaking on behalf of regions, 3 minutes for individual parties and non-party governments, 3 minutes for stakeholder groups, and 2 minutes for other observers. Please do upload the full text of your intervention in the dedicated space on the meeting website, and please do read out your key points in the room. If specific proposals are made by non-parties or organizations, we will ask parties to endorse those. We'll now proceed to take the first round of statements. I'm opening the floor for interventions. Thank you. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We believe the decision 15/9 was a landmark that filled a crucial gap. The share of benefits arising from digital sequence information and genetic resources holds paramount importance in fulfilling the third objective of the Convention on Biological Diversity. It is our understanding that the discussions under this working group must maintain consistency with the obligations set out in the CBD and its Nagoya Protocol and avoid revisiting previously agreed commitments. In this regard, we would stress that the multilateral mechanism should be devised in a manner that does not undermine national governance systems for regulation, access, and benefit sharing from the use of genetic resources and other biological resources in line with Article 15.1 of the Convention. Therefore, we would highlight the need to explore hybrid approaches to harmonize the multilateral mechanism with national systems. We further believe the multilateral mechanism must include adequate trigger points to enable substantial and predictable increase of monetary and non-monetary benefits. The basis for calculating monetary must include a percentage of the retail price or the benefit from the sale of a commercial product. We would recommend caution when introducing exceptional cases that would lower the contributions, as this is likely to undermine the overall objective of enabling a substantial increase in benefit sharing. While we understand the technical challenges related to tracking and tracing, those challenges should not be understood as an excuse not to enhance the provision of geographical information, which should be an indispensable criterion to calculate the disbursement of monetary benefits. This could take the form of dedicated regional or biome-specific accounts under the new fund. With regards to the interlinkages with other existing multilateral funding mechanisms, we take note of deep concern of the proposals to place the DSI fund under the GEF and more specifically under the GBF fund. From our perspective, the obligations of benefit sharing set out in the Convention and the Nagoya Protocol must not be confused with or replace the obligations set out in Articles 20 and 21, which are the core of Target 19.8. As GEF has been devised as an ODA fund, we are highly skeptical of its capacity to be easily adaptable to ABS regimes, where the country of origin remains the primary criterion to allocate resources. Merging ABS regimes with obligations from Articles 20 and 21 ultimately poses a major risk of diluting the responsibilities of developed countries. There is also an urgent need to substantially increase capacity development and technology transfer to improve the capacities for the use of DSI in developing countries. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. We look forward to collaborate with other countries in the following discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. Serbia, you have the floor, followed by the United Kingdom. Serbia.
Thank you, Chair. We wish to express our appreciation for the work done so far on DSI, including the work done by the Secretariat on synthesis of views on issues for further consideration for DSI submitted by parties, other governments, indigenous people and local communities and relevant organizations, and the compilation of lessons learned from other international funding mechanisms. Considering that the process of further development and operationalization of the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of DSI, including a global fund, is time-bounded, Serbia invites all present delegates to do their best to direct the discussion at this and future meeting towards a common goal of further development of the multilateral mechanism. Serbia strongly supports principles of open science, while recognizing that open access requires consideration of ownership and sustainability of open access infrastructure. Also, the role of indigenous people and local communities and their traditional knowledge is central to this issue. Their traditional knowledge and their rights must be protected. Today we are standing in front of 16 issues from the annex to decision 15/9 that need to be further considered, taking into account the submitted views of parties, other governments, indigenous people and local communities and relevant organizations. This task will not be easy, but it's obvious that after the successful negotiations of the previous year, we are more ready than ever to ensure effective and grounded discussion on DSI and finish it successfully. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Serbia. I give the floor to the UK and then Canada. UK.
Thank you, Co-Chair. The UK would like to thank the Executive Secretary for preparing the documents, including the synthesis of views and the lessons learned from other international funding mechanisms. We look forward to the publication of the studies requested under paragraph 22B and C of Decision 15/9 at the earliest opportunity. Decision 15/9 on DSI demonstrated significant progress, not only by recognising that benefits should be shared from the use of DSI, but also by establishing a multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, including a global fund. With the inclusion of a strong set of principles in paragraphs 9 and 10 of that decision, we have a solid foundation on which to make further progress towards COP16 and the operationalisation of the mechanism. Document CBD Working Group DSI-1/2 provides a good basis for discussion, and although we recognise that the issues for consideration could be grouped in numerous ways and under different headings, the UK is content with the groupings in the paper. Non-monetary benefit sharing and capacity building and development will be critical elements of an effective multilateral mechanism. The UK is of the view that we should consider how a global facility could help direct non-monetary benefits and capacity building to where they are most needed, and how this will operate in line with the long-term strategic framework for capacity building and development adopted at COP15. We welcome the historic and continued involvement of a broad range of non-party contributors to the discussions on DSI, including the private sector as future contributor to the global benefit sharing mechanism, representatives of the research and academic sectors, and Indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of the majority of the world's remaining biodiversity. We recognise that DSI is being discussed across several international forums, and the UK strongly believes that collaborating and coordinating across these processes will be key to establishing a mechanism that meets the criteria agreed in Decision 15/9. We encourage parties, stakeholders and the Secretariat to work closely with their counterparts. Finally, and without prejudging our discussions over the coming days, but recognising the body of work before us, the UK believes additional exchanges through, for example, online consultations would facilitate further progress ahead of the second meeting of the open-ended working group. We look forward to our upcoming discussions and taking the next steps in the development of a multilateral benefit sharing mechanism, including a global fund. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, UK. Canada, followed by Switzerland. Canada.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Canada looks forward to being a constructive member of this working group. We need to find clarity and to map our journey to COP16. Time is short. We need to flesh out and understand the implications of the different options. And while we do not consider that we've yet seen a solution that would meet all the decision's criteria in paragraphs 9 and 10, submissions have offered interesting suggestions and considerations. To the extent possible, the Commission studies should consider key new proposals offered at this meeting. Turning to the substance, for Canada, it will be critical that the multilateral mechanism does not hinder conservation research and innovation and does not rely on tracking the users and uses of DSI, that it's compatible with international legal obligations, including those under the existing intellectual property rights regime, and does not infringe on existing rights, including the rights of Indigenous peoples. We thank the Secretariat for bundling the issues and consider they provide a good basis for discussions. On contributions, Canada considers that a voluntary approach with strong incentives would allow for participation by all countries and all relevant actors. We are all users and we are all providers. On disbursement, we consider that benefit sharing should support conservation, sustainable use, and can include DSI capacity building for those purposes. Disbursement should be inclusive and respectful of Indigenous peoples who play a fundamental role as caretakers of biodiversity and holders of associated traditional and Indigenous knowledge. And it should be inclusive of all regions, project and needs-based, and not reliant on track and trace. On non-monetary benefit sharing, we observe that such sharing does already exist and involves diverse actors, but the mechanism can play a key role in increasing and measuring it. We should, however, avoid a prescriptive approach. On governance, the mechanism should use open science principles, but respect Indigenous data sovereignty and not compel the sharing of culturally sensitive, proprietary, confidential, or security-sensitive data and/or information. Governance and monitoring of the mechanism and fund should avoid undue administrative burden. And Indigenous peoples and stakeholders should be involved in governance discussions. On relation to other systems and approaches, extension of the mechanism beyond DSI to genetic resources can only be considered if it would be compliant with national and international obligations. We would like to see a mechanism that could be used by other fora, and the working group should consider how the DSI fund could link to other instruments. Finally, we consistently hear from our citizens that certainty on scope is key for their understanding of the issue. Thank you, co-chairs.
Thank you, Canada. I give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Namibia. Switzerland.
Thank you, co-chair. First of all, Switzerland would like to emphasize that COP Decision 59 represents a major step forward in the complex topic of DSI. There is agreement on several highly important elements. In particular, the criteria in paragraph 9 and 10 of Decision 59 are of key importance and must be met by the solution for fair and equitable benefit sharing from the use of DSI. Moreover, at COP15, we agreed on the establishment of a multilateral mechanism which mirrors the way in which DSI is being used in practice. A bilateral or hybrid mechanism would require tracking and tracing of any DSI involved, which has been recognized as not being practical. It is therefore clear that only a fully multilateral mechanism could meet the criteria mentioned before. Regarding the issues for further consideration of the annex to Decision 59, we welcome the proposed grouping of issues in the pre-session documents to structure the discussion. In the following, we would like to highlight a few specific points. An overarching issue that needs to be addressed and clarified is the legal status of the new mechanism. In our view, a legally binding mechanism would require the development of a new legally binding instrument. This would provide legal certainty, but it may take considerable time for its development and implementation. Alternatively, voluntary approaches, such as with strong incentives, should also be considered and evaluated. They may offer several advantages, such as a short time frame for implementation, openness to all contributors, the lack of need for specific definitions or rigid trigger points, as well as possibilities to further exploring options. A strong incentive could consist in excluding those participating in the benefit sharing from the use of DSI through the multilateral mechanism from any other bilateral benefit sharing obligations which some countries or providers may claim for. As regards the fund for DSI, we are of the view that the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund that is being established by the GEF would be well suited to accommodate the DSI fund. Besides minimizing additional administrative burden and increasing efficiency and practicability, synergies could be used due to similar objectives of these funds. With respect to the relationship to other international ABS instruments, coordination will be needed to ensure coherence and mutual supportiveness among instruments, to consider other sectorial use of DSI, and to avoid potential double obligations. Regarding industry, academia, as well as database holders and managers, we would like to emphasize that they are primary producers, managers, and users of DSI, and therefore key stakeholders in this process. It is therefore crucial that they can participate in the discussions and can contribute to the development of the multilateral mechanism. Finally, we would like to reiterate that capacity building and development and technical and scientific cooperation are key parts of a solution for benefit sharing from the use of DSI. We will make more detailed comments in the upcoming discussions and are looking forward to fruitful deliberations over the next days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. I give the floor to Namibia, followed by Japan. Namibia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Namibia is again taking the floor on behalf of the African group. Mr. Chairperson, Namibia would like to further reiterate on the statement given during the opening of this session that Africa fully appreciates the progress that has been made during COP15. Africa also recognizes the document on DSI before us, including the synthesis of views and lessons learned from other multilateral mechanisms. Africa notes that advanced technology and research in developed countries continues to enable them to yield benefits and believe that the main objective of the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism fund should include assistance to developing country parties to the CBD in conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Mr. Chairperson, Africa also recognize and appreciate the key points on the thematic group for furthering considerations and the table that has been provided as an overview of the groupings of the issues from Annex 1 under Decision 15/9. Africa also take note and appreciate the submitted views. Under governance of the fund, Africa believes that the monetary benefits to be shared under the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing should be deposited in a global fund that should operate under the financial mechanism of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Mr. Chairperson, in terms of triggering points for benefit sharing, Africa is of the belief that triggering points for monitoring benefit sharing will be from the production, use, and commercialization of DSI, obtaining IPLC's rights on any interventions of research resulting from retailing of commercial products. We further wish to elaborate that in terms of the contribution to the fund, each developed country party will take measures to ensure that an amount at least 1% of the retail price of all commercial income, net revenue from the products resulting from all utilization of biological resources, including digital sequence information on genetic resources, is contributed to the multilateral fund. Mr. Chairperson, further to our deliberation and engagement, Africa is of the view that the potential to voluntarily extend the multilateral mechanism on genetic resources or biological diversity, there is a great potential to reduce complexities and have a further proof mechanism if we extend the mechanism to biological resources. Therefore, Africa supports extending the multilateral mechanism to biological resources. Mr. Chairperson, Africa would further like to reiterate that in terms of the discussions under non-monetary benefit sharing, including information on geographical origin, as one of the criteria, we believe that non-monetary benefit sharing will include capacity building and development. Capacity building and development is thus important to facilitate the identification, utilization, monitoring, and management of biodiversity as a form of non-monetary benefits. In conclusion, Mr. Chairperson, under other policy options for the sharing of benefits from the use of digital sequence information on genetic resources, including as identified through further analysis as referred to in paragraphs 6 and 7 of Decisions 15/9. There are other processes under other multilateral mechanisms that we recognize, as rightfully explained in the beginning of this opening session by the Secretariat, the BBN, the WHO, and the Plant Treaty. Whilst it is important that the multilateral mechanism should not be counter to these multilateral mechanisms, it will be important to strengthen the linkages between the different treaties and explore if the different treaties can explore having a unified global mechanism which would serve the best interest of all. Mr. Chairperson, we would wish to further reiterate that capacity development and technology transfer is a key issue on DSI and should be integrated in the mechanism for technical and scientific cooperation and capacity building and development of the convention and development and technical and scientific cooperation, and should also be systematic and mandatory part of the DSI policy. Mr. Chairperson, we would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity and wish to reiterate again that as the African group, we are ready to continue discussions in order to ensure that on further development of the mechanism of its timely operationalization, which we believe to be critically important for the success of COP16. We would continue to emphasize on this, Mr. Chairperson, that any delays may not be welcomed by our region, because it is indeed important for Africa that we collaboratively deliver a successful mechanism to support resource mobilization, conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and support the vision of living in harmony with nature. We further stress again, Mr. Chairperson, that it is important that we take cognizance of the fact that time is no longer on our side. I so thank you.
Thank you, Namibia, on behalf of the Africa Group. That was very helpful. I give the floor next to Japan, followed by Australia. Japan.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Thank you, Switzerland, for hosting this important working group. Japan would like to take this opportunity to present our proposal for a multilateral mechanism to share the benefit from the use of DSI as one of the options to be analyzed by the Secretariat according to the paragraph 22B of the Decision 15/9. We have submitted a written statement to the Secretariat with our proposal attached. Let me briefly introduce the major points of our proposal. First, we need to admit that there is a legal discrepancy. We interpret DSI is not within the scope of the CBD. However, we need to move forward with the COP decision adopted. Because of this legal discrepancy, the best way to move forward is an establishment of a flexible and pragmatic mechanism with no mandatory implication. Second, as DSI-related policies will have impacts on wide-ranging stakeholders, we need to secure their understanding on the value of DSI use and the importance of biodiversity conservation in order to realize sustainable development of our social activities. Based on their understanding, we can encourage all DSI stakeholders to get involved in the mechanism through some financial or fiscal incentives or policy mix such as TNFD and nature positive initiatives. If we take a top-down mandatory approach to generate revenues from the use of DSI, there is no legal certainty to implement it domestically. If modifications of the convention and related national legislation are needed, it would take many years to implement the mechanism. To start benefit sharing from DSI as quickly as possible, we believe a voluntary mechanism is the fastest way. For these reasons, Japan believes that the feasible and practical solution should be an open voluntary mechanism that provides a win-win solution to both providers and users of DSI. We encourage parties and observers to take a look at our written statement and the attached proposal. Our wish is to make a constructive contribution to the discussion on DSI. We are happy to discuss and explain the details about our proposal for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan, for expressing that spirit of collaboration. I'll give the floor next to Australia, followed by Uganda. Australia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Australia acknowledges the importance of facilitating innovation, information and scientific measures to protect and repair our biodiversity, to ensure it can provide benefits to current and future generations. With the development of a multilateral mechanism and a fund, Australia believes that these cannot be fully operational and fit for purpose until a better understanding of the type of information that will be included or the scope and coverage of information types and sources is determined, and believe that discussions on the scope will help lead us to a path to better create a mechanism that is fair and equitable to all. Further, any mechanism cannot be applied retrospectively, and the provision of benefits must be accessible to all. This includes developed country parties as potential source or country of origin of information and science, and moreover to Indigenous peoples and local communities within developed countries. Finally, Australia considers a multilateral mechanism should not restrict open access and sharing of information. Science and technology information is fundamental in protecting and restoring biodiversity and ecosystem services, and we do not want to establish a system which would stifle this critical element in our global efforts. Discussions here this week in Geneva on digital sequence information should see a variety of options discussed and assessed for merit to ensure any mechanism and funds proposed is in line with the mandate of the Convention and supports, not hinders, implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Any fund needs to complement and not reduce the efficacy of other funds, such as the GEF and GBFF, and also needs to provide the ability to receive funding from all stakeholders, acknowledging information is not just accessed by governments alone. We look forward to this week's discussions and encourage parties to participate with an open mind to identify a roadmap to tackle this complex issue and work toward filling the COP15 decision. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Australia. I give the floor to Uganda, followed by Indonesia. Uganda.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Uganda would like to thank the Secretariat for the compilation of views to provide working documents for this meeting. Uganda supports the statement from Namibia on behalf of Africa. Uganda therefore welcomes the establishment of a fair, transparent, inclusive, participatory, and time-bound process to develop and operationalize the multilateral benefit sharing mechanism arising out of COP Decision 15/9 and the synthesis of views presented in CBD paper WGDSI-1/2. Uganda supports the approach for the discussion of the synthesis of views, which groups the discussion into 5 groups. Uganda believes that the Global Fund should be open for voluntary contributions from all sources, obligatory contributions from industry, contributions from 1% levy on all commercial sales from products developed out of the utilization of DSI. Uganda supports the sharing of benefits arising out of the use of DSI in an open and transparent manner to support on-the-ground activities aimed at the conservation of biological diversity and the sustainable use of its components in line with the ecosystem-based approach in pursuit of spending priorities identified from time to time. Given the very rapid advances in science and technology, Uganda proposes that appropriate consideration be taken to future-proof the access to and utilization of genetic resources through yet unknown approaches from technological advances/innovations. This will address the current exponential growth in DSI and any future technological innovation or advance in the access and utilization of genetic resources beyond the present DSI. Otherwise, we will again be convening here to start chasing after DSI in its future transformed version. Uganda supports capacity development and technology transfer and proposes it becomes a systematic and mandated part of DSI policy. Enhanced capacity development will democratize the access and use of DSI, making it more equitable for access and use. Uganda notes the importance of capacity building in DSI to facilitate the identification, utilization, monitoring, and management of biodiversity as a form of non-monetary benefit sharing. Therefore, we support the integration of capacity building in broader capacity building initiatives, taking into account the special needs and environments of each country, indigenous peoples, and local communities. On governance, Uganda proposes that the multilateral benefit sharing system be cognizant of the following principles, that is, transparency, accountability, integrity, and collaboration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. I give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Malawi. Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. At the outset, Indonesia would like to support the initial statement by Brazil in general. The multilateral mechanism should not undermine national governance systems for regulating ABS from the use of genetic resources and other biological resources. This is in line with Article 15.1 of the Convention. Our discussion must be fully consistent with CBD and Nagoya. Regulating access and benefit sharing is key. In this regard, protection of genetic resources is needed for the effective benefit sharing of these resources. Indonesia understands the importance of terminology of technology development, database management, and data openness and data sharing. Nevertheless, open cannot be directly mean and does not necessarily mean unrestricted. A good policy and management need to be formulated to reach a common understanding without halting scientific research and development. If we agree on the multilateral mechanism, it must include adequate trigger points to enable substantial and predictable increase of monetary and non-monetary benefits. Furthermore, international notification systems for management of information related to the use of DSI is required with a view to ensuring compliance, enabling the monitoring and review of effectiveness. And finally, on the DSI fund mechanism, we are of the view that it should be separated from the GEF for the effective implementation of the DSI. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Indonesia. I give the floor to Malawi, followed by Saudi Arabia. Malawi.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Co-Chair, Malawi supports the statement made by Namibia on behalf of Africa and expresses its commitment, like other African countries, towards the full development of a multilateral benefit sharing mechanism by COP16 in its totality. As Malawi, we recognize the importance of maintaining open access alongside the monetary benefit sharing and capacity development to enable developing countries like Malawi to use DSI for their research, innovation, and development. We therefore support the African proposal for a dedicated program to be developed for capacity building on generation, use, and access of DSI for developing countries, which can then be linked to the discussions under the CBD on capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation. As Malawi, we believe that we should be optimistic with regards to what the mechanism can achieve for biodiversity, bearing in mind what biodiversity provides for the health, food, agriculture sectors, and other billion industries. We therefore would like to indicate that the financial goal for this mechanism should be aligned to providing a substantial part of the $200 billion funding gap, and that contributions from the industry in developed countries who benefit from biodiversity should be mandatory. We are okay working on the basis of the clusters as proposed, and are ready to engage with other parties towards fulfillment of our mandate for further development of the multilateral mechanism and making recommendations to the Conference of Parties at its 16th meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Malawi. I'll give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by Kuwait. Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. إن انعقاد هذا
Thank you very much, Chair. The holding of this meeting confirms once again the commitment of the international community to our ambitions, that is to say, protecting biodiversity and ensuring sustainable development, as well as benefit sharing. Our meeting will take into account the exchange of information of what we know in digital sharing and to promote our efforts in order to set up a multilateral mechanism which would be fair and equitable. In this regard, Saudi Arabia supports 15/9, and we believe that a common approach to support this requires a clear mechanism for research, for scientific research, and for innovation. Any new use with regard to this digital knowledge should be shared equally and in full transparency. The benefit sharing in this regard is something that our delegation would like to underscore. There's a need to build capacity in order to use these benefits and genetic resource sequencing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saudi Arabia. I will give the floor. Kuwait, I think you were next on my list. Did you lower your hand? No, you're still there. Can I give the floor to Kuwait? Thank you.
شكرا سيد الرئيس وشكرا لسويسرا.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to thank Switzerland for hosting this meeting, and we also would like to extend our appreciation for the information that has been prepared for us on DSI by the Secretariat. Today's information is without doubt being discussed in other international fora and initiatives, and it's for this reason that we must promote our efforts to ensure that we can adopt a harmonized, flexible, and simple mechanism. We say unified and harmonized because we believe it is important that for DSI we must also build capacity, and it is our hope that we will be in a position with the help of everyone to achieve this objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuwait. Next on my list, I have Morocco, followed by China. Morocco.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We first extend our thanks to the Secretariat of the CBD for drawing up these working documents. They are good summaries and help us in our work on Decision 59. We also would like to support the statement that was made by Namibia on behalf of the African group. First and foremost, with respect to the time frame for the implementation of all of these activities in the run-up to COP16. This is a very ambitious, given all the data involved. The second point is that we want to endorse is that capacity building is absolutely essential to ensure that we are all able to deal with this meeting on DSI. We wanted to speak to item 9 of 15.9. This has to do with 9D concerning security and legal transparency of exchanges of DSI. We must reflect on the best option to ensure that we can have a resource for the genetic resources of each country of origin, while using and sharing the DSI, that is making sure that we have open access to these sequences, but security is also very important for us. We must also ensure that we protect intellectual property rights. There's also another issue of concern to us. This has to do with 22 in Decision 15.9 concerning the studies to be carried out to analyze and model how a multilateral mechanism for the sharing of DSI and any option that the group may decide on, as well as a study of options for income generation and for these value chains. So these are very burning issues for us, and speaks to implementation in the intersessional period. We must also look at the recommendations and reflect on the entire Nagoya Protocol for that matter, because we never spoke about DSI before. We only spoke about genetic resources. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't add a specific article that speaks to this issue of DSI. So that's it from me, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morocco. I'll give the floor to China, followed by Côte d'Ivoire. China, over to you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. We thank the Secretariat for for their hard work in analyzing and compiling the conference documents, providing a good basis for consultations over the next 5 days to fully discuss DSI on genetic resources and find more consensus. Dear colleagues, at COP 15.2, we reached an important consensus on setting up a multilateral mechanism for DSI and a global fund. Now it's time for us to implement the decision. On our way to establishing the mechanism, the views and positions of the parties are so different that we call for unity to overcome the difficulties. On the issue of benefit sharing of DSI, China understands each country has its own position, and we respect each other's interests and demands. However, humanity is a global community with a shared future in which we all stand to gain or lose. No country can stay immune. The only way to solve the problem is to work together. In this regard, China calls on all parties to continue the spirit of cooperation adopted when KMGBF was reached at COP15. Fully discuss the issues in Decision 15.9. Try to find the maximum common factor in the benefit sharing of DSI and find the focus and priorities for further discussion at this meeting as soon as possible, and ultimately establish a practical, balanced, cost-effective multilateral mechanism. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Very welcome words. Thank you very much, China. I give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire, followed by South Africa. Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci. Thank you very much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. Côte d'Ivoire would also like to thank the Secretariat for the excellent documents that have been made available to us, which allow us to better understand the themes which have been addressed for developing the multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing and DSI. Côte d'Ivoire supports the statement that has been made by Namibia on behalf of the African region. For my country, the group of questions that are to be examined are guidelines to help guide our deliberations. Côte d'Ivoire welcomes this process of developing a multilateral mechanism on DSI, and this is a subject which requires multilateral and bilateral approaches. They should support what's ongoing because all traditional resources and knowledge do not necessarily exist in the public sphere. Côte d'Ivoire believes that the major users of DSI industry, for example, and the World of Wealth should support to giving funds to this transparently. Funds should be easy to access, and it should be given efficiently to developing states because they are the ones who have the structures within their territory who are managing biodiversity, for example, forest areas, protected areas, etc. And access should be given to indigenous peoples and local communities who are the guardians of biodiversity. Côte d'Ivoire believes that the geographical origin should be part of the funding criteria because that would ensure fair and equitable funding for the users and those who need projects, and they could submit requests for funding. The funds should be given to competitive projects. Non-monetary benefits for their part, for example, should be used to address capacity building. Similarly, transfer of technology should be addressed here. This is crucial for us developing countries. Côte d'Ivoire would suggest that these questions be taken into consideration. Lastly, Côte d'Ivoire believes that taking into account accountability and legally binding accountability mechanisms is something that is essential. Thank you very much for your kind attention, Chair.
Thank you very much, Côte d'Ivoire. Next on the list, South Africa, followed by Norway. South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa also would like to align its intervention with Africa. Therefore, I'll be short. South Africa reiterates Africa's appreciation for the commitment to establish a multilateral mechanism for benefit sharing from the use of digital sequence information and a global fund in a timely manner. South Africa is keen on the advancement of discussions on the issues listed in the annex to Decision 15/9 and therefore welcomes the clustering of these issues into groupings and supports using contact groups for more focused discussion to not only build common understanding but also to agreeing to the form and the structure of the mechanism. South Africa further wish to propose a test or a pilot to model the African proposal as mentioned in the Africa Group's opening statement to assess the potential contributions to the Global Fund, as these funds are to be created for a common goal in achieving the objectives of the Convention. South Africa wished to clarify that extension of this mechanism to genetic and biological resources should only be for those circumstances described in Article 10 of the Nagoya Protocol. Finally, South Africa also came prepared to advance work on further development of the mechanism for its timely operationalization and concurs with Africa that delays to this is delaying the contributions to conservation of biodiversity. We need to fast-track this process to give effect to the purpose of our common vision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa. I'll give the floor to Norway, followed by the Republic of Korea. Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Edelweiss to you, as they say here in Switzerland. Norway would like to point out that the situation for biodiversity and ecosystems is grave, according to the IPBES Global Assessment and other sources. The coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is a direct political response to these scientific finds and recommendations. The key word is transformational change. With this as background and building on the breakthrough at COP15, where we established the multilateral mechanism and the fund in 15/9 and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, we need to finalize the multilateral mechanism. I also want to point out that the BBMJ Treaty Part 2 builds on Decision 15/9 and offers momentum. Modalities for the sharing of monetary benefits from the use of DSI, the treaty says, should be mutually supportive of and adaptable to other access and benefit sharing instruments. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that statement. Norway has the following views for the plenary. The objective of the mechanism and the fund should be conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. Open access to data is fundamental to innovation, environmental protection, public health, and food safety, and must be kept. The running of the multilateral mechanism and the fund must lead to a substantial contribution to Target 19 of the Global Diversity Framework. This might have implications for the choice of scope and the trigger point for the multilateral mechanism. Indigenous peoples and local communities should be the main benefactors of the fund. And this is, of course, because the IPBES Global Assessment points out that they are the best stewards of biodiversity, and their rights must be respected. Some points are on the relationship to the private sector. Mr. Chair, the fund should primarily be based on contributions from the private sector. Therefore, the mechanism must be simple and from the outset mirror the needs of the private sector. And this has to do with the mechanics of the mechanism and the fund. In other words, it has to be in line with business reality. This also means that there should be ample room for consultations with representatives of the private sector, including whether the GBFF, that's the Global Biodiversity Fund established in Vancouver, can be used. The solution must be mutually supportive across UN fora. That means across the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, the BBNJ on the UNCLOS, and the WHO Pandemic Treaty. Hybrid solutions doesn't work well in a multilateral mechanism and should be avoided. And tracking and tracing will compromise the multilateral mechanism. Mr. Chair, the clock is ticking. It's less than a year until COP16. So additional exchanges of views will be important, also intersessional exchanges, both informal and informal. Under Inf Docs to this meeting, you will find a document called Dialogue on the Design of a Global Fund from the use of DSI, Meeting Summary. This meeting was held in Oslo, Norway, 2nd to the 4th of October this year, funded by UK and Norway and organized by Meridian Institute. You might find this document an important resource to be used in the deliberation of this meeting. The second document presented on the information page or under InfDocs is a side event starting at 1:15 p.m. organized by the ABS Capacity Development Initiative called Reflections on Features and Modalities of the Multilateral DSI System, Outcomes of the Global DSI Retreat. Presenting the outcomes of the second Global DSI Retreat, in October 2023, the multi-donor ABS initiative convened the second Global DSI Retreat, supported by the governments of Norway and the Netherlands, supported also by the government of South Africa. And this retreat brought together some 40 CBD negotiators, IPLC representatives, as well as commercial and non-commercial DSI users. And the purpose of the event was to promote a deeper mutual understanding of common and divergent perceptions, interests, and concerns regarding the multilateral mechanism for DSI benefit sharing and the fund in the context of the GBF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Norway. I let you speak a little longer because you greeted me so cheerfully. Thank you for that. Edelweiss to you too. Who's next? Republic of Korea, followed by Eswatini. Thank you very much. Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I can also cheerfully say hello to you. Yes, before I get started, Korea would like to congratulate on your assumption of this important task at this critical moment. And Korea also would like to appreciate the Secretariat of your relentless efforts to enable us to be here. First, Korea would like you to recall the historic event and historic agreement with regard to DSI, which took place in 2022 in Montreal. It took us 6 years to come to this agreement for benefit sharing from the use of DSI. Republic of Korea hopes that the momentum and spirits we found and exerted in Montreal could continue today and coming days for as early operation of the DSI multilateral mechanism as soon as possible. Toward this end, Korea believes that we have to recall the distinctive features and practices in the existence, generation, and use of DSI. Even though Korea strongly believes that DSI is not within the scope of CBD and Nagoya Protocol, we decided to agree with the benefit sharing from the use of DSI. Most importantly, after I heard several previous interventions, Korea hopes that we could find a common understanding that DSI mechanism would be basically in violation of Article 28 of Vienna Convention on Laws of Treaty, so-called retrospective effect. Despite this, we have to be reminded that we agreed with the beneficiary commitments with a retrospective application. Finally, Korea would like to say that we could benefit most from leaving behind the individual egos, at least with regard to the DSI, for the earlier operation of DSI mechanism. Therefore, Korea believes that only multilateral system could make this happen in a timely manner. Korea hopes that we could have a constructive negotiation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Korea. I give the floor to Eswatini, followed by Egypt. Eswatini.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And please allow me to present a statement from the Kingdom of Eswatini. Firstly, we would like to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting the meeting and its hospitality. The Kingdom of Eswatini supports the statement made by Namibia on behalf of Africa. Eswatini is one of the richest countries in biodiversity, with endemics which contribute to food security, health, and other ecosystem services. The country is currently facing challenges in the implementation of initiatives aimed at biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, and the equitable sharing of benefits accruing from its utilization. Mr. Chair, specifically, the Kingdom of Eswatini lacks the necessary capacities and financial resources to advance initiatives aimed at implementation of the Convention, and in particular, the Nagoya Protocol. Eswatini has developed administrative guidelines to implement the protocol, but still lacks the necessary capacity to implement fully its provisions, and in particular, DSI. Mr. Chair, it is on this note that Eswatini supports the call for capacity building and development initiatives on DSI, amongst others. Our communities have been the custodians of our biodiversity for the longest of time. Our culture prides itself on the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, which has supported our traditions and helped us advance our cultural uniqueness. It is for that reason that we believe it's time our communities accrue benefits from their conservation efforts to incentivize more action. Hence the reason we support the call for timely operationalization of the multilateral mechanism for DSI, including a global fund. Thank you, co-chairs. The statement will be sent to the Secretariat accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Eswatini. Egypt, followed by Argentina. Egypt, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the presence of the meeting and the acting director, executive director of CBD, as well as the co-chairs of the meeting as well, for all of the good statements that actually inspired all of us. Secondly, Egypt certainly is in favor of supporting strongly the statement given by Namibia on behalf of Africa on all of the issues that were stated, whether regarding the approach, closing the funding gaps, capacity building and development, other processes which we benefit very, very little from them. I mean, for me, the BBNJ, it is just, it's not yet enforced. How can, it will take years and years to develop modalities and to be practical. We have to learn how much we gain even from ABS protocol. ABS protocol is almost now 10 years and the multilateral mechanism is not, so the benefits are not as such. So we have to learn from experience over the years how much people, especially the indigenous people and local communities, benefit from the use of DSI and other genetic resources. We are here to translate the CBD CAP 15.9 into action. How can be done? How can this be done? Personally, I feel two things. Number one, we have to learn and we have to ensure and we have to understand that all issues related to ESI from the use of genetic resources are ethical. That means they are the God creators. Whatever you do in terms of manipulation, whatever, still you use these genes that were created by God. So it is ethical that all of us, we have to consider this. Secondly, we have to consider the issue of win-win situation. In all developing countries, for example, we cannot protect all of these resources. We don't have these resources, whether financial or technical. If we continue business as usual, that means that all of these resources will be declined and will be done. And you, as developed countries, will suffer greatly from it. So we are here to see how can we provide solutions and go ahead in a way that all of us end up by having, hopefully, an operational guidelines or multilateral mechanism that all of us we could be proud of. Who, after all Africa have been interested in this issue, i.e. the DSI, in a way that we can benefit from them. Thank you, Mr. Shah.
Thank you very much indeed, Egypt. I will give the floor to Argentina, and then at the other end of the alphabet, Zimbabwe. Argentina.
Gracias.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Argentina is grateful to the Secretariat for preparing the documents that will be used as our roadmap for this first meeting of the working group. Argentina welcomes the historic adoption of Decision 15/9, which recognizes the critical importance of digital sequence information on genetic resources and its importance to the third objective of the Convention, and agrees on the need to ensure that the benefits are shared that arise from its use. We believe it is essential to take forward the work on developing the multilateral mechanism established in the decision and to avoid any backsliding on previously concluded agreements. As such, we will be referring to some of the elements that we believe are central to developing and operationalizing the multilateral mechanism under and the fund. The mechanism adopted at COP15, and which is linked to the third objective of the Convention, is geared towards sharing benefits arising from the use of DSI. This is not a mechanism for mobilizing voluntary contributions. The monetary and non-monetary benefit sharing and the disbursement of funds in particular must take place with priority consideration given to developing countries because they are the main providers of genetic resources, including DSI, and where appropriate, it must also recognize the traditional knowledge associated to these resources as well as the sharing of indigenous peoples and local communities in their benefits. Access to technology must be promoted and encouraged for developing country parties, as must the transfer of technology to them, and thereby develop and strengthen a robust and viable technological and scientific base. The Conference of the Parties agreed that the approach adopted does not affect existing rights and obligations. We also understand that the multilateral system should be a mechanism that's in harmony with the provisions under the Nagoya Protocol, which at present are being implemented by countries, and it must also be aligned with ABS provisions under national legislations. As such, the multilateral system should not represent a new system. Rather, it must be complementary to access and benefit sharing systems that are already being implemented. It is also important that the multilateral system focus on sharing the benefits arising from the use of DSI and traditional knowledge associated with DSI. Argentina reaffirms in this regard the permanent sovereignty of states over their natural resources, including genetic resources. And we would refer this meeting to the provisions of Resolution 1803 of the United Nations General Assembly, dated December 14, 1962, which states in operative paragraph 1 the right of peoples and nations to permanent sovereignty over their natural wealth and resources must be exercised in the interest of their national development and of the well-being of the people of the state concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Before I give the floor to Zimbabwe, two short announcements. So my colleague from Norway was so busy greeting me politely that I think, if I understand right, the documents that my colleague from Norway was referring to are available under the other document tab on the working group website. Very good, he wanted to make that clear. We've reached 1 o'clock. We have a long list of parties, which is very welcome. I see a number of non-parties have raised their hands as well. We will get to you this afternoon. Have no fear, we're looking forward to hearing from all of you. I'll take 3 more interventions now, which will be Zimbabwe, India, and Jordan, and then we'll break and we'll simply resume the meeting at 3 o'clock and carry on with the list as it stands. So the 3 parties, Zimbabwe, India, Jordan. Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Chair. Chair, as you are taking the floor for the first time, would like to thank the CBD Secretariat for organizing the meeting and the government of Switzerland for hosting us. We also take this opportunity to congratulate both of you on your appointment as co-chairs. Zimbabwe aligns itself with the submission made by Namibia on behalf of the Africa. Hence, we will not repeat what has been said already. Chair, to further qualify what Namibia said, the establishment of DSI funding mechanism should not betray in any way the fundamental reason behind the decision CBD 15/9 by failing to deliver a practical, fair, and transparent mechanism. The envisaged mechanism should ensure that users of DSI must undertake a commitment to ensure that benefits arising from the use of such DSI and the associated knowledge, traditional knowledge, find its way to the providers of such DSI, including respecting the economic and cultural rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Chair, should always be borne in mind that DSI forms part of the individual country's national heritages, hence must contribute to the national development of the same countries. DSI is not an exception. It simply has to contribute to national development. It's a resource. This should not, however, be misconstrued to mean that we do not support research. We fully support research, access to data, and the sharing of knowledge. But this should be done in a way that respects national sovereignty over natural resources and equitable sharing of benefits. Basic terms have to be discussed and agreed during these discussions on the establishment of this multilateral funding mechanism. Thank you, Chair. We so submit.
Thank you very much, Zimbabwe. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for giving us the opportunity. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and thank the CBD Secretariat and the Co-Chair who have worked tirelessly in putting together all the relevant documents for the benefit of the ad hoc working group meeting. I would also like to thank the government of Switzerland for their hospitality in hosting this conference. Chair, the value of biodiversity to mankind also lies in its economic dimension, alongside the cultural and social values. India is a mega-diverse country, and the nation has consistently been at the forefront in taking action on biodiversity conservation, protection, restoration, and enrichment. Having said that, we cannot only conserve, preserve, and restore our resources, we must also promote sustainable use of our valuable resources, its mindful and deliberate utilization, as opposed to mindless and destructive consumption. This is the message of LIFE, Lifestyle for Environment, which was launched by Honorable Prime Minister on 20th of October 2022 in the presence of UN Secretary General. Rapid technological advancement have resulted in emergence and growth of digital sequence information, which is the subject matter of today's discussions. and this poses further challenges in the realization of benefits from the utilization of genetic resources. This has become a major challenge now and has to be solved with the cooperation of parties and Secretariat of CBD in a just, fair, transparent, equitable, and accountable manner. India's considered position is that DSI's solution cannot be inconsistent with the CBD and its Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing, which recognizes national sovereignty, as has been voiced by several speakers before me, and this national sovereignty over natural resources, including genetic resources, as per Articles 2 and 15(1) of CBD, and also imposes an obligation on the parties to adopt legislative, administrative, and policy measures with the aim of fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources as per Article 15(7) of the CBD. A multilateral mechanism on the sharing of benefits arising from the use of DSI should not be incompatible with the sovereignty of states to regulate access to its genetic resources, including access to any knowledge associated with it. If it infringes the same, then the multilateral mechanism becomes unqualified under paragraph 9G of CBD Decision 15(9), which states that the solution should not be incompatible with the international legal obligations. Chair, I would also like to mention a few points which have been raised. One is on the governance of the fund. Here we believe that the funds can be channelized through a multilateral mechanism which exists today, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund or the Global Environment Facility or the Green Climate Fund, and that it should be channelized through the competent national authority, CNA. And that can be designated as the designated agency responsible for receiving and administering funds and disbursement of the funds. Regarding the triggering points for benefit sharing, our view is that the triggering point should be from commercialization of the DSI, and the companies, entities which commercialize products using DSI ought to mandatorily mention the origin, source, and use of the DSI for triggering the benefit sharing mechanism. As regards the issue of the potential to voluntarily extend the multilateral mechanism to genetic resources or biological diversity, we feel that the national systems operate on prior informed consent and the mutually agreed terms. Where the PIC and MAT are being implemented, these should be prioritized over the multilateral approach to ensure that the multilateral approach does not affect the bilateral activities at the national level. Regarding the disbursement of monetary benefits, including information on geographical origin as one of the criteria, we feel, and we have already stated earlier, that it should mandatorily, the companies, entities that commercialize products using DSI should mandatorily disclose the origin, source, and use of the DSI for triggering the benefit sharing mechanism.
India, thank you. That's very helpful. I'm sorry to interrupt. We must get, I think our...
Just 1 minute, Chair. Regarding the non-monetary benefit sharing, including information, etc., we feel that the multilateral mechanism needs to promote in the long term the creation and development of national databases. I'll end by, mentioning that we are all supportive of fruitful deliberations that will preserve and enhance our natural heritage that our ancestors and traditions have provided us. We are custodians of planet Earth, and it is our bounden duty to further enrich the rich biodiversity of Mother Earth, restore its pristine glory, and hand it over to the next generation for the benefit of one and all, mankind, nature, and all forms of life. It is this spirit which has been captured so truly in our logo of recently concluded G20 presidency, where India has come out with the logo of One World, One Family, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, and One Future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, India. That's very helpful. Jordan, how will you send us to lunch?
إعداد الوثائق وتؤكد الأردن وعلى أن المقرر 15/9.
Decision 59 is an essential document for the principles and use of digital sequencing and benefit sharing. And the decision proposes different principles in order to strengthen creativity. The envisaged mechanism should take into account duties linked to using DSI and should take into account the rights of peoples, indigenous peoples, local communities, and strengthen the KMGBF. The specialized global mechanism with on DSI and the related parts on benefit sharing should be part of or aligned with national legislation. Therefore, it should also be taken into account in Resolution 15.7. We should also take into account what figures in Para 1 of Target 19 and participation in DSI. Benefit sharing is part of non-monetary aspects, which should be part of the mechanism. Of course, we're going to participate in the deliberations in an efficient manner, which will decide how this mechanism is going to be rolled out on the ground. Now, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Dear colleagues, that was a very fruitful first exchange. We're very grateful. We will pick up exactly where we left off. Please leave your flags raised. We will follow the list. We will see you back here at 3 o'clock. In the meantime, do go enjoy the side events that are available for your enjoyment. Thank you very much.